Hello, it's Thursday. I'm making a giant spider. More specifically, I'm going to be showing you how I size up patterns, and I'm going to be using my pumpkin spider as a demonstration of that. Now, we aren't multi-stranding or using bulky yarn. In fact, we're going to size up using black magic. And what I mean by that, of course, is maths. No, don't leave. It's easy, I promise. So just as a quick disclaimer, before we get too far into this, I only do this with my own designs. If you do try this with somebody else's pattern, it is my opinion that anything you create with it is still the original designer's property. You can discuss down in the comments below how you feel about it, but long story short, I would never encourage anybody to distribute patterns that didn't belong to them. It's just not nice. All right, enough of that, let's get into it.
Okay, so today we are going to double the size of this little spider. Now, what that actually means in terms of how big this will be is that we've got a spider that is this size, right? Now, when you double the spider, what we're going to do is we're actually going to double both the width and the number of rows that we're working in, which means that we end up with a spider that is twice as wide, as well as twice as tall and twice as long. So you'll see we'll end up with a spider that's a fair size, and that's exactly what we're looking for here. Okay, so I've grabbed a copy of my pattern and I'm going to start off with one of the legs, just because it's a nice easy place to start. Step 1. We double the number of rows. So looking at my pattern, the short leg piece that I'm working on has 14 rows in total, so I'm just going to write out the numbers of 1 to 28 down my page. Step 2, we double the row totals. Okay, so looking at our pattern here, I can see that row 1 has a total of 6 stitches. Now, because we're doubling the number of rows as well, we double the row number and then we double the total number. So what that means is row 2 will have a total of 12. And then the next row down is row 2. So we double the row number, so 2 times 2 is 4. And we double the row total. 6 times 2 is 12. So we know row 4 has a total of 12. So I'm just going to go through and I'm going to do that for each of the rows now. Okay, so step 3 is you fill in what you know. So looking at this pattern, I can see that a lot of these rows are just single crochet around to form a tube type shape. So for each row that's just a simple row of single crochet around, I can go in and add that to this map now as well. Okay, so you can see that we've started filling this out a little bit now. So we filled in all the obvious bits there, and so now we're going to move on to step 4, which is working out how to start. So the original pattern started with a magic ring of 6 and then just continued on in rows of 6 single crochet. But what we can see here is that we need to get up to 12 stitches around by our second row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to still start with the magic ring of 6, and then my second row, instead of just repeating the first row around, I'm going to make that 6 increases to get us up to 12. It gets us up to the right number to work the rest of the leg. Now, if you have any other areas in your pattern that require sort of an even increase from one number up to another, you can also do it that way. So say your original pattern calls for you to go from 6 stitches up to 36 stitches over the course of 6 rows. Well, to translate to the new pattern, what you would do is look at the overall thing and go from 6 stitches up to 72 stitches over 12 rows, and make sure that you sort of increase evenly along the way to maintain that shape. So that is just something to keep in mind as well. So that is how this piece starts. So for step 5, we need to break down what's missing. So the big section that's missing on this one here is this chunk in the middle where we build basically the knee of the leg. So there is a quick way to do this and a slow way to do this. But I'm just going to go through the long way first, just to give you an understanding of what's happening, and then I'll show you how to do the quick way. Okay, so the first row we'll be trying to translate is row 8 on the original pattern, so it will be row 16 on this pattern here. So that's what the original row looks like. So what I find it very useful to do is to map this out visually and see what the row is trying to accomplish. So row 7 had 6 stitches in it, so that's what we'll start with. I'm just going to swap colours to try and make this a little clearer. So I'll designate a starting point. It doesn't really matter where that is for this case. So then what this row is doing is it's increasing, increasing, and then decreasing, decreasing. So what we can see pretty clearly is that for 1/3 of the stitches, it's increasing and growing bigger, and then for 2/3 of the stitches, it's shrinking down and growing smaller. So to translate that onto a 12 stitch round, which is what we actually are working with here, just designate that same starting point. So we need to split this up into thirds. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. And then we know we need to increase in this third and then decrease in this third, which when we write it out will look like 1, 2, 3, 4 increases and then 1, 2, 3, 4 decreases for 12 stitches in total. So we know that that is our new row 16. If you have a look at what these two rows are actually doing there, you can see that all we've done is we've taken this number, this number, this number, and this number, and times each of them by 2 to arrive at that number, that one, and that one. So that is your shorthand right there. So you can see that we can map it out and just make sure that the growth is happening in the right place and that we are doing the same thing with the row, just at a larger scale. But you can also just come along and times the key numbers by 2. So I'm going to just write that row in here. So row 18, we are increasing up to 16. So that is row 9 from the original. I'm just going to use the shorthand to translate that row. So it becomes row 18. And there is our new row 18. So for that row, you'll see that that's a 2, that's a 2, and that's a 2, meaning that there is sort of a hidden 1 in front of those stitches there, and then this is a 6 because that's a 3. And then I just finished it off and did the last row there. So then we get to step 6, which is basically fill in the gaps. So barring the example of the exception I gave earlier, where you're trying to evenly increase a piece, basically most of these gaps will take the total number of stitches from the previous row and just repeat that number of stitches. So you can see that along this column here, a lot of them are just 12 single crochet around. Row 17 is 12 single crochet because of the row above it. Row 19, it's 16 single crochet because of the row above it. And we just continue that down the length of the pattern. So that's row 6 complete, and now we have a line of instructions for every single row that we need, but there's still just one more thing we need to do. So that is step 7, we need to add our color and loop notes. So looking at the original pattern, there are no loop notes, so we work the whole thing through both loops. We don't need to make any notes about that, but what we do know about this pattern is that there are color changes in it. So what the idea is now is that we go through and we mark out where we make those color changes. So in the original pattern, we start in purple, and then after row 3, we change to grey. So that will now be after row 6. So that is the last row we do in purple for the first one. So I'll just mark all of those. So our next purple row in this pattern is row 6 in the original, so row 12 in this one. We then change back to grey. The next time we are purple is row 11 on the original, so row 22 in this one. And then it looks like we are just finishing off in purple. So there we go. This pattern is now ready for us to have a go at making. We're just going to go ahead and whip up one of these legs now. So I've worked my way through to row 25, and you'll also see that where I just stitched on detail on the smaller one, I've managed to I just changed the row color roughly where they go just to keep them in proportion, because I realized that stitching them on would make the lines too narrow. But now I have the option of stitching on detail like that around the other legs and adding an extra layer of detail, which is something you really do need to think about when making something bigger. So there is our short leg. It's like a leg extension, haha. Anywho, focusing. I'm going to need to go and locate my stuffing again and stuff this little guy. Okay, so there is the finished leg that is twice the size of the original. So you can see here, this is the one we were making. Actually, I think this was the one we were making. This was the one we were making, and you can see here that it is twice the length, definitely twice the width. It is just, I think it comes out as like 4 times the volume, 8 times the volume. We don't need to get mathy about this. That is the short leg of our massive spider. So I am just going to use this exact same process to make the longer legs.
So I went ahead and I made all of the legs.
So for the longer leg, it's almost exactly the same as the shorter leg, but I thought I'd come back and I'd show you the head and body piece, just because it's a more interesting shape, it's a little bit more complex, and you might get a better idea or a better feel for how this whole process works. So I'm going to breeze through the steps. So step 1, double the rows. Step 2, double the row totals. All right, so step 3, we're going to fill in what we know. Now on this piece, there is a lot more sculpting than on the leg. So what we know is a little bit more limited. So that's all of that. And now we're moving on to step 4, which is working out the start. So once again, this piece originally starts with a magic ring of 6 and then works up to 12 stitches. So in this pattern, we need to start and work up to 24 stitches over 4 rows, which we can still do with a magic ring of 6. It's just we work up each row adding 6 stitches in. Sorry, for this notation you'll note that I'm putting the totals next to the rows just because that can be an easier way to work when you're freeform on a sheet of paper like this. So as part of this step, I'm going to look for other situations where we're trying to just increase or decrease our rows evenly so that I can add the proper stepping in instead of trying to just double the steps involved. And so another place that sort of even increase happens is between the end of row 36 and the end of row 38. So we've got another even sort of growth, couple of rows there. And you can see that on the pattern because they'll look something like this. Any rows that look entirely like that are aiming for even growth. You can see from our little map here that we're building that we need to go from 72 single crochet around at the end of row 36 up to 84 single crochet around at the end of row 38, which is an increase of 12 stitches in total, and we have 2 rows to do it in, so we can increase by 6 each time. So 72 plus 6 is 78, just like 78 plus 6 is 84, so that's good. That's what we want to have happen here. So now we just need to work out that transitional step. So we want to increase by 6. We know that 72 divided by 6 is 12, meaning that this will be 11 single crochet and then an increase to get us up to the 78 we need, and then we're going to do the same thing to get up to 84 here, just like that, so we can fill in that gap. Now looking if there's any more of those, I can see that the only other time this sort of transition occurs is when we're decreasing down to finish off. So on the original pattern, I can see that happens between row 26 and row 30, which translates to row 52 through to row 60. So you can even see here in our totals, we have a very even stepping down, 60, 48, 36, 24, 12. And you can do that using the increments of 6 that you're used to. In fact, that actually extends up to row 50. I missed that, where it starts at 72 and starts stepping downwards. So from there, it's just some pretty basic maths. So we've got 72 divided by the increment of 6 we're trying to decrease by. So 6 goes into 72 12 times, meaning that we have 12 stitches to fit into this bracket. We know a decrease equals 2 stitches, leaving 10 stitches remaining. So we've got, that's our step. So we want to repeat 6 times, 10 single crochet, and then a decrease. And I'm just going to continue that progression down the line. Once you have that first step, the next steps are just 9 single crochet and a decrease, 8 single crochet and a decrease. So you only really have to do that maths once. So I can see that by the time I reach the end of my rows, I'm only down to 12 stitches, and really ideally we'll be down to 6 to finish off. So I'm actually going to add another row at the end, and that row is just going to be 6 decreases around to leave us with a smaller opening, which we can then finish off properly. So you can do that. Okay, so that's step 4 done. And now we're going to do step 5, which is breaking down what's missing, which is working out these sculptural steps. Okay, then for step 6, we just go through and add the blank rows in. And finally, step 7, go through and add colour and loop notes. And that is the sized up version of the head and body, and I'm just going to whip that up now. Okay, so I've worked up most of the head. We've finished the sort of widest point off, and I've positioned the eyes roughly where they should be, according to where they are on the smaller one. It's just the biggest eyes on the smaller one make up the smallest eyes on the bigger one, and luckily I just had these massive 28 mils ready to go. So I'm going to pop all of those in place with their little clips on the back. Okay, got to talk to you quickly between the thunder. So there is its head and body. And there is the original for size comparison purposes. I decided to go a little bit more freeform with the markings on the back, and I'm really pleased I did actually. So with all those pieces made, I'm just going to finish assembling my giant spider.
So there she is. Okay, so that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed watching me make my new spider pal here. If you did, don't forget to hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe. You might miss out on next week's creation. So let me know in the comments what you think I should supersize next. But otherwise, that's it for this week. Okay, bye. Do you know anyone who's looking for a giant spider?